Nintendo, it's time to move on from this era of The Legend of Zelda. Now, I am someone who loves the Legend of Zelda franchise. I think it's one of my favorite franchises at the end of the day. I didn't have a Super Nintendo growing up, so I didn't play A Link to the Past when it was new. When it comes to NES, I didn't have those Legend of Zelda games because most of my NES games were hand-me-downs from my uncle, and my uncle didn't have the Legend of Zelda, so I didn't have it either. My first real experience, though, with the Legend of Zelda franchise was, of course, the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. I remember coming home from middle school one day, and at my front door was a package. It was a package addressed to me from Nintendo, and I was like, whoa, what is this? So I went inside and opened up the package, and boy, oh boy, was I shocked. Inside of the package was the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time Collector's Edition with a beautiful gold foil front and a golden cartridge, and I felt like Willy Wonka and having a golden ticket. I was in. This is great. They sent me this because I was a Nintendo Power subscriber. In my excitement, I called my mother up at work to tell her the good news, and she kind of got quiet and laughed a little bit and said, "You're an idiot." I was like, "What?" They sent it to me. And she was like, "No, I bought that for you as a gift, and you were not supposed to open that up." And I was like, "Oh. Well, I mean, I've already opened the box up. Like, I know what it is, so can I go ahead and play it?" And she was like, "Yeah, that's fine." So, of course, over the next few days and nights and weeks and months, I played The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, trying to figure out every little nook and cranny that the game had to offer. It was an absolutely outstanding experience, and an experience that I still revisit from time to time, even as an adult. I like to play through the game once every few years and just get that nostalgic feeling in my bones. Obviously, The Legend of Zelda has been around for a very long time, but there definitely was a bit of a shift when it comes to the Legend of Zelda franchise when The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild came out. Now, Zelda games always sold really well. They were always pretty popular, and they were always resonating with Nintendo fans. But mass appeal kind of eluded the Legend of Zelda franchise, at least up until that point. Yeah, you knew people who played it, but they were usually gamers. You didn't see many outside people getting into the Legend of Zelda. But with the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, everything kind of changed. Obviously, this is the most successful selling Legend of Zelda game of all time. And if you're a diehard Zelda fan, you would notice differences between this game and the other games. But if you're a newcomer to the franchise, like millions and millions and millions of people were, this was the first time you ever experienced a Legend of Zelda game. And it felt very free. You had open reign to do whatever you want. Usually, Legend of Zelda games up until that point always followed a very similar structure. You would start out the game, you would go to the first dungeon. Within that first dungeon, you would get some sort of item or ability that you can use, and then that would allow you to progress throughout the game, going to different dungeons, getting different items or abilities in order to access newer areas within the map. You could go around and do different things within the map. There was usually a good sense of freedom, at least at the time of the release of those games. But Breath of the Wild, I mean, they just went crazy with it. They started you out and said, "Hey, go do whatever you want. Go anywhere you want to go. Fight anything you want to fight. You might get your ass kicked because you're underpowered, but this is what you're doing. This is where you're going. And if you want to go here, cool. If you want to go on your own little beaten path, that's cool too." That sense of freedom definitely resonated with a lot of individuals. And like I said, some traditionalists didn't love the new direction of The Legend of Zelda and what the franchise was doing, but the sales numbers don't lie. It is the most successful selling Legend of Zelda game of all time. And it seemed like ever since then, Nintendo has been very steadfast when it comes to the Legend of Zelda franchise as far as what the newer games are concerned with. Because since that game, Breath of the Wild, came out, there have been 3 games that have direct ties to that game that have released on the Nintendo Switch or Nintendo Switch 2. You, of course, had Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, a game that draws heavily from Breath of the Wild as far as environments, storylines, characters, enemies, Pretty much everything in the game was a direct tie to that game. Of course, the gameplay style was different because it was a Warriors game, which has you mowing down hordes of enemies and stuff like that. But as far as the Zelda lore is concerned, pretty much right in line with all that sort of stuff. And then you had Tears of the Kingdom. Tears of the Kingdom taking place within, the same Hyrule that we just explored in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, but some things are different. They've added in new gameplay elements, the constructs and building stuff. Yeah, the map is the same, but they changed things on the map so it doesn't feel exactly the same. And they added in the depths and the sky as well. So now there's more to see, more to do. Granted, it still feels exactly like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild did in terms of the core gameplay from things like combat, weapon degradation, so on and so forth, but it also feels the same in terms of freedom. You can go wherever you want, do things on your own decree, do things on your own schedule. And it was a very successful game. It didn't quite hit the same marks that Breath of the Wild did, and I think the primary reason is pretty simple for that. You still have that era of Zelda fan who wishes for the traditional style. Now, there have been some traditional games on the Switch, which I'll talk about in just a moment, but the most recent Legend of Zelda game was, of course, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, a game I put a lot of time into. 40 plus hours. Really enjoyed it because I enjoy warrior style games, and having Zelda characters in a warrior style game is really fun. It gives you something different to do. It changes up the gameplay. But all the stuff in the game, the timeline, the characters, the setting, the things that you do, they're directly from Tears of the Kingdom, which most of Tears of the Kingdom is directly from Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, which most of Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment is directly from Breath of the Wild. There has definitely been a timeline that has been established, and people love to talk about the Legend of Zelda timeline as if all of these games are interconnected. There are clearly games that are connected in some way, shape, or form. Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Clearly, those two games are connected. A Link to the Past and A Link Between Worlds. Clearly, those two games are connected. But I feel like this goes a bit beyond with these four specific games being the main focal point of the Legend of Zelda franchise for the past 9+ years, in that it's not just a storyline connection. It's also a gameplay connection. It's also a character connection. It's also a world and visual style connection as well. But RGT, we had a couple smaller Zelda games come out on the Switch, and yeah, you're right. We had a Link's Awakening and then Echoes of Wisdom. Two fine games. If you've never played Link's Awakening before, it was a decent way to play it, albeit with some performance issues. And then Echoes of Wisdom was fine as well. But that's obviously not the direction and not the focal point for Nintendo when it comes to Zelda games. It's this timeline. It's this era. It's this world that they have built. And I know that, Nintendo has said, we're not going to do like a direct sequel to something like Tears of the Kingdom. And I truly believe that is what they're not going to do. I don't think we'll see a direct sequel to Tears of the Kingdom, but I can't help but imagine like what's next for The Legend of Zelda. Because I feel like there's a lot of people that are kind of tired of the same lineage that we've gotten the past 9 years. The same environments, the same characters, the same story, the same visual style. All of these things are very important in a Legend of Zelda franchise. And when you look at the Legend of Zelda franchise as a whole, you've never really seen the same visual style transcend across multiple games and multiple pieces of hardware. The Legend of Zelda original game doesn't look anything like the Legend of Zelda 2 does, which doesn't look anything like A Link to the Past does, which doesn't look anything like Ocarina of Time does. Now, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask look very similar, but then we once again start the cycle over again. Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, like these games don't look the same. There's always been visual changes, and while the core gameplay may remain similar, these games always felt very different and very unique. Whereas what Zelda is now for the mainline games, I don't think it has that same feeling. Like, yeah, obviously a Warriors game plays differently than Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. I'm not necessarily talking about that. I'm just talking about the overall presentation, the overall feeling that you get. Because when you look at both of the Warriors games that have come out during the Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom era, I mean, they're very similar. And the games look similar, and they feel similar as well, which isn't a bad thing if you enjoy the Warrior style. But I almost feel like some of this has to do with just how video game hardware is nowadays. Because Nintendo doesn't have a Game Boy or Game Boy Advance or a Nintendo DS or a 3DS. And I feel like because of that, maybe that's the reason why we've seen so many of these Legend of Zelda games being so very similar over the past 9 years. With the handheld systems, you would do something completely different. Think about the handheld games that you got. Link's Awakening, Oracle of Ages and Seasons, Minish Cap. I mean, Phantom Hourglass. Like, you're going crazy with this stuff, with drawn doodles and, using the stylus to control the game. A very different time frame. And I think it's kind of a shame that that time frame is gone. Because I feel like, as it stands right now, gearing up to go into 2026, people want something fresh with The Legend of Zelda. And I don't even necessarily mean something new. I almost mean something a bit more traditional. We've had all of these Hyrule Warriors games. We've had Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. That's been the focal point for the franchise. And I know Nintendo, like I said, they're not planning on doing a direct sequel to Tears of the Kingdom. But you also have to think to yourself, like, are they going to get rid of that engine? They're going to get rid of that physics engine? They're going to start from the ground up with The Legend of Zelda? Where do you really go with it? What's the next move? I'm not quite sure. I don't think anyone has that answer except for Nintendo themselves. And it'll be very interesting to kind of see, like, where the direction is. Like, will it still take elements from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom? Will it be a completely different experience, a completely different timeline, a completely different, feeling going into these games? Or will they just rely on old reliable? Because you don't want to get too far away from the wheel if the wheel is what's spinning and getting you from point A to point B. You look at the success of both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, the mainline Zelda games, and then those games birthed off the offshoots. Link's Awakening is an offshoot in and of itself. Echoes of Wisdom is an offshoot in and of itself. Breath of the Wild had an offshoot game, it was that popular. Tears of the Kingdom had an offshoot game, it was that popular. So do you completely scratch all that? I think you do. I think you have to. Because going into 2026, I've had my fill of this visual style. I've had my fill of this world. I've had my fill of these characters, and I've had my fill of these gameplay elements. It's been great. Don't get me wrong. I have thoroughly enjoyed it, probably more than many other people have, except for Age of Calamity. Like, that game just sucks. It needs a Switch 2 patch so it's 60 frames per second, and then I could enjoy that game. But I feel like most people are content with what we have gotten from it, but we're ready for something new. We're ready for something fresh. We're ready for something different. Not necessarily an offshoot game. Something more in a mainline style. Something that's clear that this is going to be a focal point for The Legend of Zelda going forward. A new direction for the game. And it doesn't have to be completely, burn everything to the ground. You could take elements from previous games to do something with this. But I just think Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom and all of their offshoot companions have had their day in the sun. It's been a fun ride. It's been an enjoyable ride. But you've milked that teat quite a bit, pal. It's time to go back and do something different. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people disagree with me on this. Maybe they want more of Tears of the Kingdom. They want more of Breath of the Wild. Maybe you want DLC for it. Like, hell, Nintendo's not above doing DLC for Switch 1 games, slapping $80 on it, and then calling it a Switch 2 version. That's clear as day. Let me know what you think of this, though, in the comment section down below. What do you kind of want from the Legend of Zelda franchise? Because I think it's time for a change. And, like, it may be hard for Nintendo to accept that or want to do that, considering the success of both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. But, sometimes you have to move on. Sometimes you got to let go of the past and, look towards the future. You can have a link to the past. You can have an ocarina of time. But your tears for the kingdom are going to make your breath wild. That was damn good. Hit like and subscribe if you're new to my channel. Hit like if you're not new to the channel. Share the video around. Give me your thoughts. And as always, guys, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.